The icy wind roars across the fjords as a Viking family gathers around a crackling fire. Life wasn't about conquest, it was about survival, hard work, and unity. This is the reality of the average Viking. So, life for the average Viking began at home, inside the long wooden houses that dotted the rugged landscapes of Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. These weren't grand halls of kings, but simple, smoky shelters built to survive brutal winters. A single longhouse could stretch up to 60 feet, its thick timber walls packed with mud, straw, and animal dung to keep out the cold. The roof was layered with turf, where grass often grew, blending the house into the hillside. There were no chimneys, only a central fire pit. The smoke curled upward, blackening the rafters before seeping out through small roof holes. It was harsh, but it worked. That smoke kept insects away, preserved meat, and even strengthened the wood beams. Inside, the air was warm but heavy. Along the walls, narrow wooden beds were lined with straw and covered with wool blankets. At night, the whole family slept side by side, sometimes even with their animals for warmth. The floor was dirt, and the smell of smoke mixed with hay and food cooking in iron pots over the open fire. It wasn't comfort by modern standards, but for them, it was security. Every longhouse was its own little world. The head of the household, usually the father, oversaw farming and trade, but women held remarkable power for their time. Viking women could own property, request divorce, and run the family's business while men were away on voyages. Historical records from Iceland's sagas tell of women like Odd the Deep-Minded, who became a respected leader and landowner after her husband's death. In many ways, Viking women were the backbone of their communities, keeping the farms running and the family fed when the men sailed across the sea. Children grew up fast in this world. From an early age, boys learned to fish, herd animals, and use simple tools. Girls learned weaving, cooking, and how to preserve food. But they also played games. Wooden toys, small balls, and even early board games have been found in Viking sites. Every skill a child learned had a purpose: survival. The longhouse wasn't just a home, it was a center of social life. Families often shared space with servants or workers, and everyone ate together from wooden bowls. A typical meal might be barley porridge, goat cheese, or dried fish caught from icy waters nearby. When darkness fell, the family would gather by the fire, telling stories of gods and heroes. These tales weren't just entertainment. They taught values like courage, loyalty, and honor. In the heart of winter, when storms trapped them indoors for weeks, that bond became their strength. The glow of the hearth, the murmur of old stories, the steady rhythm of spinning wool, all kept despair away when the outside world froze solid. For the average Viking, home wasn't built for comfort or beauty. It was built for endurance. It was a place of warmth against endless cold, of family against isolation, and of love against the harshness of nature. In every smoky beam and rough-hewn wall, you can still feel the spirit of those who refused to let the ice and wind defeat them. And when the first rays of sunlight touched the icy fields, the Viking day began. For most people, life revolved around hard physical labor. Despite their reputation as fearless warriors, the majority of Vikings were farmers, craftsmen, and traders trying to keep their families alive in one of the harshest climates in Europe. Their tools were simple: iron plows, wooden rakes, and sickles. But their skill and discipline turned frozen land into fertile soil. Farming was the backbone of Viking society. In the short northern summers, every moment counted. Men and women worked side by side, sowing barley, rye, and oats before the snow returned. These crops became bread, porridge, and beer, staples of the Viking diet. Livestock was just as important. Cows provided milk, sheep gave wool, and pigs supplied meat for the long, dark winters. Archaeologists have uncovered animal bones and iron farming tools at sites like Hedeby and Jorvik, proving that even near the bustling trade centers, agriculture remained at the heart of daily life. The Vikings also understood that survival meant using every bit of nature wisely. They built irrigation ditches, rotated crops, and used animal manure as fertilizer. When harsh weather ruined the harvest, they relied on stored grains or dried fish. Still, one failed season could mean starvation. That danger pushed many Vikings to look beyond their homeland, turning them into traders and explorers. Trade routes became lifelines. What began as small local exchanges of wool, iron, and amber grew into vast networks stretching across continents. From the cold fjords of Scandinavia, Viking ships sailed down rivers through Russia, reaching Constantinople and even Baghdad. There, they traded furs, honey, and walrus ivory for silver, silk, and spices. Arabic coins found in Viking graves show how far their economy reached. But not all Vikings left home. Many became skilled artisans, shaping the tools, weapons, and jewelry that others carried abroad. Blacksmiths forged iron nails and axes, while carpenters built ships with curved keels that could cut through both sea waves and shallow rivers. These craftspeople were highly respected, for without them, the Viking way of life would crumble. Work wasn't just survival, it was identity. Every family had its rhythm. Mornings echoed with the sounds of axes splitting wood and hammers striking iron. Midday meals were quick breaks before tending animals or fixing fishing nets. In coastal villages, fishermen set out in wooden boats, their hands numb from the cold, hauling cod, herring, and salmon to dry for winter storage. Inland, farmers mended fences or built new barns before the frost arrived again. The Viking year was guided by the seasons, not by clocks. Summer was for work, autumn for harvest and trade, winter for mending tools and sharing stories, and spring for preparing the fields once more. Even their festivals, like the midwinter Yule or the summer blot, were tied to the cycles of nature. Moments to thank the gods for good harvests and safe travels. Through all this, one truth defined their lives. The land gave, but only if you earned it. The average Viking's hands were rough and calloused, his back bent from labor, but his heart carried a fierce pride. Farming may not have been as glorious as raiding, yet it was the foundation that made the Viking world possible. Every warrior's sword, every ship that sailed the seas was paid for by the sweat of farmers who turned frozen soil into life. When you picture the Vikings, don't just see warriors crossing oceans. See the quiet strength of those who stayed home, who worked the land, bartered their goods, and built the prosperity that made the Viking Age thrive. Their legacy wasn't only written in battle, but in the steady rhythm of life that began every dawn with a hoe in one hand and hope in the other. And food was never taken for granted. Every meal was a small victory against nature itself. The long, freezing winters of Scandinavia could last half the year, so survival depended on how well families prepared during the summer months. A full pantry wasn't just a comfort, it was life or death. Most of what Vikings ate came from their own farms and nearby waters. Barley, rye, and oats were turned into thick porridge and flatbread baked on iron plates. These grains were the foundation of their diet, filling and simple. For protein, they relied on fish, livestock, and hunting. Along the coast, men cast nets into icy fjords for cod, herring, and salmon, while inland families raised cows, goats, and pigs. Nothing went to waste. Every bone, hide, and scrap was used. Even blood was boiled into soups or mixed with flour to make blood bread, a dish strange to us today but normal to them. Vikings were experts in food preservation. They had to be. Salt was precious, but when available, it turned meat and fish into supplies that could last months. Smoking was another vital technique. Archaeological digs at sites like Ribe and Kaupang show smokehouses where meat hung from wooden beams, drying slowly in fragrant smoke that flavored and protected it. In the far north, where salt was rare, Vikings dried fish and meat under the sun and wind, creating a tough but durable food called stockfish, still eaten in parts of Norway today. Dairy was also a cornerstone of Viking life. Cows, goats, and sheep provided milk that was turned into butter, cheese, and a tangy drink called skyr, which still survives as an Icelandic yogurt today. These foods were rich in fat and protein, perfect for surviving long winters when fresh crops were gone. But not every year was kind. A failed harvest or harsh storm could bring famine. In such times, Vikings turned to whatever nature offered. Roots, dried berries, or even tree bark mixed with flour to stretch their bread. There are written accounts from the sagas of families forced to travel miles through snow just to trade for a sack of grain. Feasts were rare but sacred moments. When the harvest was good, or a raid returned with wealth, whole villages gathered in the longhouses for nights of celebration. The tables overflowed with roasted meat, bread, and ale brewed from barley and honey. These feasts weren't just about food, they were about gratitude and unity. They honored the gods, the ancestors, and the hard work that kept them alive. Archaeological evidence from sites like Borg and Lofoten reveals massive feasting halls where hundreds could gather under one roof. The clatter of cups, the sound of laughter, and the rhythm of drums filled the smoky air. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and join our Viking journey. And for the Vikings, faith was not something separate from daily life. It was woven into everything they did. Every sunrise, every storm, every harvest, and every death carried the presence of gods, spirits, and ancient powers that guided their world. Their beliefs were born from nature itself, a reflection of the land they lived in, beautiful, unpredictable, and unforgiving. They believed in a vast pantheon of gods, each representing forces they saw around them. Odin, the wise Allfather, ruled over Asgard and watched humanity with his single knowing eye. Thor, with his mighty hammer Mjolnir, guarded both gods and men from the giants of chaos. Freyr and Freya symbolized fertility and love, essential for a good harvest and a peaceful life. These weren't distant gods. They were companions in every struggle. A stormy night meant Thor was fighting above the clouds, and a poor harvest might mean the gods were testing their devotion. At home, families made small offerings of food or ale to household spirits, called landvetter, who were believed to protect their land and livestock. Larger sacrifices, known as blots, were held during major festivals. These gatherings could last for days, filled with feasting, drinking, and songs in honor of the gods. Animals, usually goats, pigs, or horses, were sacrificed to ask for blessings of health, fertility, and victory. It wasn't cruelty, but gratitude. One of the most important festivals was Yule, celebrated in midwinter. Long before Christmas existed, Vikings gathered to honor the return of the sun after the darkest time of year. They lit bonfires, feasted for days, and decorated their halls with evergreen branches, symbols of life enduring through death. Vikings believed that how a person lived and died determined their place in the afterlife. Warriors who fell bravely were said to be chosen by the Valkyries, maidens who carried their souls to Valhalla, a great hall where Odin's chosen heroes feasted and trained for the final battle of Ragnarok. Those who lived ordinary lives went to other realms, such as Folkvangr, ruled by Freya, or Helheim, a quiet, shadowy world ruled by the goddess Hel. Contrary to popular belief, Hell wasn't a place of punishment. It was simply where most souls found peace. The Vikings saw magic and fate as real forces. They practiced Seidr, a type of Norse magic often led by women known as vulvas. These seeresses could foresee events, bless crops, or protect warriors with charms and chants. Archaeological finds, such as staffs and ritual seats found in graves, confirm how respected these women were. Even powerful warriors and kings sought their guidance before major decisions. Their gods were not perfect beings. They were flawed, emotional, and deeply human. The sagas describe them arguing, making mistakes, and showing mercy. This made them relatable. A farmer could pray to Thor for thunder and rain, a mother to Freya for her children's safety, and a sailor to Njord for calm seas. And what you wore and what you carried said everything about who you were. Viking clothing was built for endurance. Winters were long and punishing, and their clothes had to protect against freezing winds and heavy snow. The first layer was usually a linen shirt, soft against the skin and good at wicking away sweat during work. Over that came thick wool tunics and trousers, warm even when wet. Archaeological finds from sites like Birka in Sweden show finely woven wool dyed in earthy tones of brown, red, and blue. These weren't dull garments, they were colored with natural dyes from plants and minerals, proving that even the average Viking valued appearance as much as function. Cloaks were essential. Made from heavy wool or animal fur, they acted like portable blankets against the cold. They were fastened with bronze or iron brooches that also served as decoration. A farmer might wear a simple pin, while a wealthy merchant's cloak could be held by an ornate silver clasp, engraved with runes or animal motifs. Footwear was equally practical. Shoes and boots were hand-stitched from leather, often waterproofed with fish oil or animal fat. In winter, people stuffed dry grass or moss inside to keep their feet warm, an ingenious trick against frostbite. Viking women were skilled weavers and tailors. They used looms to create intricate patterns, some of which survive today in burial sites. They also made accessories, belts, necklaces, and beads, crafted from amber, glass, and bronze. Each piece reflected personal taste, family wealth, or sometimes even faith. A woman's brooch might hold her dress in place, but it also displayed her artistry and rank within the household. Tools, too, told stories of Viking life. Iron was precious, so blacksmiths were among the most respected craftsmen. In their forges, they shaped tools for every purpose. Plows for farming, axes for chopping wood, nails for shipbuilding, and needles for sewing sails. Archaeologists have unearthed entire toolkits from Viking graves, including hammers, tongs, chisels, and knives. Every household had its essentials: wooden buckets, clay pots, iron cooking pans, and bone combs for grooming. Weapons were also part of daily identity, even for those who never went raiding. A small knife, called a seax, was carried by nearly every man and woman. It was a tool for cooking, carving, and self-defense. Wealthier Vikings might own a sword, but those were rare and costly. Every cloak woven, every blade forged, every brooch polished by hand was part of a culture that valued effort and endurance. Their world was rough, yet their attention to detail turned necessity into art. So, if you've enjoyed this journey into Viking life, don't forget to subscribe and join us again as we uncover more secrets from the ancient North. The next voyage begins soon.